Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela and this is podcast episode number 37. Okay, I am already too warm, the hair has gone up. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you're new here, as I said, my name is Michaela and I'm a knitter from Dublin, Ireland. And here on YouTube, I just like to talk about my knitting. I upload videos once a month at least, sometimes more frequently, but for the last while it's been once a month. Before we get into the video, I wanted to thank everyone who left positive comment on my last video. It can be pretty intimidating to share political views online, and it's not that I have any shame about people knowing my political views. I'm very open about them when the time is right. But I know for me personally, when I come to watch knitting videos on YouTube, I am sick to death of hearing about all the political stuff that's going on in the world, and I like to just listen to something very inconsequential like knitting. And it's the same when I make knitting videos. I like to talk about knitting and not think about any of the other stuff that's going on in the world right now. So yeah, it can be kind of intimidating to share political views because you know you're going to get negative comments either way, no matter what you say. But it was really, really nice. The vast majority, like the overwhelming majority of comments were positive. If you can't tell by the fact that my hair has already gone up, it's very warm today. It's 20 degrees, which is basically a heat wave in Ireland. I am wearing my Alpine Bloom tee, but even this is too warm. It's wool, so, oh, and it's got a double layer because of the colour work, so that probably makes sense. I don't think it's going to last for the whole video. But we'll see. I've got my first iced coffee of the year. Well, actually this is my second, but my first was today. And yes, it is a stemless wine glass because I don't have glasses that are the exact right capacity for my iced coffee, except for this glass. In today's video, I once again have no finished objects, which is crazy. I can't remember the last time I showed a finished object on YouTube, but anyway, it's another episode with no finished objects, lots of whip updates, and I am certain that I will have at least one finished object in the next video, maybe more than one. But yeah, for today I just have some whip updates, some new cast-ons, and a lot of acquisitions. Again, it's not good. I mean, it is good, but it's also not good. And so with that, we're getting straight into my first whip, which is my self-drafted Aran Jumper. If you're new here, this is a jumper that I'm drafting based off a jumper that belonged to my granddad. The original jumper is made in a very coarse, itchy Irish wool, and it's also massively oversized, way too long, just like unwearable. It's nice to have it as a little heirloom piece, but it's not practical for actually wearing. So I decided to recreate it in a more wearable format. No! I'm so paranoid about colour differences since my whole sleeve debacle, so I just thought I saw something very scary in the body, but I think it's okay. I think it's just kind of the natural variation in the yarn. I'm knitting this in Explorer Knits and Fibres Rocky's DK in the colour Ave Noir, and I'm knitting it on a 3.5mm needle. And my plan is to release this as a free pattern and a free video tutorial, and probably talk a little bit about that today. In the last episode, I did have one sleeve almost complete, but there was a colour difference visible in the sleeve. I think it was from when I had done one of my mid-project blocks. Whatever yarn had been incorporated into the jumper at that point kind of lost a bit of the colour. I think the water was too warm, and for whatever reason I had to take out some of that yarn. Maybe, I can't remember if it was the sleeve or the body, but I had to rip it out, and when I ultimately reused that yarn in the sleeve, it looked lighter in comparison to a fresh skein that I had wound up. So there was a very visible colour blocking difference in the sleeve. Honestly, it wasn't that noticeable in person. I even showed my family and friends who aren't knitters, so maybe that matters, but I asked them if they noticed anything and they said no. And then I asked on Instagram and the vast majority of people said no, but depending on the lighting it was very obvious, and I showed it in my video last week and it was very, very obvious in the video. At one point I even said it doesn't look as bad in natural light, so I'll put in some b-roll footage of the natural light, and then when I did put in the b-roll footage as I was editing, I was like, it is really obvious. Why did I say that? Like, it's so obvious. And everyone in the comments rightly said, Michaela, it's still very obvious even in the natural light. So I frogged it and I reknit the sleeve, and this time I alternated skeins. I still used the same 2 balls of yarn, but I just alternated them every row. I did the same thing for the second sleeve because I was using yarn that I had ripped out of the jumper and just wound back up into a ball. And I was also using a fresh skein of yarn, so I just alternated skeins just to be on the safe side, and I think, yeah, both sleeves look pretty good now. And I am really glad that I reknit it. I think even when I was recording my last video, I knew in my head that I was probably going to redo it. So yeah, I am really happy with the outcome now. I've worked both cuffs on the sleeve, but I haven't bound off, and I worked them both differently. So I did this one first. My main needle is a 3.5mm needle, so for this cuff I went down to 3mm. I did my usual trick of turning the work inside out so that my wrong side of the ribbing was on the outside, because that looks better. But I just thought that it didn't look very cinched in comparison to the rest of the sleeve. It's kind of hard to tell because it has a cord in, but it almost looked like it was even flaring out in comparison to the sleeve, and I just wasn't too confident that it was going to look good when I bound it off. So I decided to do the second sleeve differently, knowing that I would have to bind off or have to undo at least one, maybe both, if I didn't like this one either. So for this cuff I went down to a 2.75mm needle, and I also introduced a decrease every 7 stitches. So I did that on the first round of the ribbing, and I think it looks much better, but I'm still not sure it's as cinched as I would like it to be. Having said that, the reason I haven't bound it off is because I'm going to block it, because I know these cables will open out, and if they do, then I think it will be the perfect level of cinchiness. But if the ribbing opens out as well, then it might not be as cinched as I would like it to be. So that's my plan. I'm just going to block it and see which cuff, if either, I prefer. If I don't like either of them, I'll redo both of them. I might end up having to do a decrease every 5 or 6 stitches. 5 seems really extreme, but 6 isn't that different from 7, so I might have to do every 5 stitches. I think with these cables, your gauge gets really tight in comparison to the same yarn and needle in a stockinette stitch, so it kind of maybe makes sense that I would have to decrease more often to get a more cinched effect in the ribbing. I had a similar experience with the front of the collar, because the honeycomb cable gauge, it's much tighter than a stockinette gauge, and so for me, where I would usually pick up 1 stitch in every stitch across a stockinette jumper for the front of a collar, for this I had to pick up 2 in every 3 stitches just to get the collar kind of cinched in, because it was flaring too much. In the meantime, I went back to the body and I worked it until the point that I'm pretty sure I want to start the ribbing, but I am going to wait until I've blocked it, checked the length, made sure I'm happy with the length before I start the ribbing. And I'm not sure what type of ribbing I want to do, so again, it will be dependent on how those cuffs turn out, if I want to do the 2.75 and decrease every 7 stitches, or if I want to decrease more frequently. That will be determined once I've blocked it. Although this is technically still a mid-project block, I think it's going to be the last time I block it. I don't think I'm going to block it again after I've done the ribbing. I don't think it'll benefit enough to justify blocking it again. Because I don't know how many times I've blocked this jumper, which, I mean, it's normal when you're self-drafting, but yeah, I just don't think it will be necessary once I've added the ribbing. Another thing that I noticed when I was editing the last video is, I'm going to try and find it now, there's a weird blue stain in one of the shoulders. Is it this one? I can't see it now, so if I can't find it, I'm just going to stick in a clip from the last episode. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is. I don't know where that came from. I cannot see it in person. I can promise you I cannot see it in person. I'm not just lying to myself. I only noticed it when I was editing the video last time, and I don't know what it is. But if it doesn't come out in the next block, I don't know if I'm going to do anything about it. By anything, I mean I was thinking I could duplicate stitch over it, but I don't even know if I'm going to do that, because as I said, it's really not that noticeable. But yeah, it's so weird how these things just show up on camera sometimes. I'll put in some B-roll footage of me trying it on so you can see the fit. I really like the fit, actually. It is giving me that polished look that I was going for, especially around the shoulders. I feel like it looks like the shoulders are quite sharp and defined, rather than that oversized baggy kind of look that I have with some of my more relaxed fit jumpers. And you know, that fit has a time and a place, but with this particular jumper, I wanted it to look more polished, sleek, and not necessarily fitted as in, like, I didn't want it to be glued to my body, but I just wanted it to kind of fit over the contours of my body a little bit better than some of my more relaxed fit jumpers, and I think it does that. I do think that's helped by the gauge. The fact that it's knit on 3.5mm needles and it's a lighter weight DK yarn just kind of contribute to the drapiness of the fabric and give it that more polished and elevated look. One thing I'm not sure about is the collar, and when I knit the collar I was a little bit uncertain about the size of the opening that I had left. I was worried that it was too big, and I just wasn't sure how to know how big to make the neckline. That was something that was a big kind of stumbling block for me in self-drafting this, and I worked the collar to kind of pull in that neck hole as much as I could, or as much that I've seen it do in other patterns, but I didn't want to push it and end up causing the fabric around the neck opening to bunch. So I think I kind of reached the limit of how few stitches I can pick up around the neck opening to get that kind of cinched in collar. I don't think I can get it any smaller if I wanted to without causing bunching around the neck hole. And depending on what I wear underneath, you might be able to see the collar of whatever t-shirt or anything that I'm wearing underneath. And I don't mind that look with some jumpers, but with this jumper, I wanted it to look almost like I'm not wearing anything underneath. I want it to look like it's just a normal top, but just obviously a very intricate top. That was just the vision that I had in my mind of this jumper. And so if I'm not wearing anything underneath, or if I'm wearing something with like a low scoop neck, it's fine, I really like it. But if I'm wearing just a regular crew neck t-shirt and you can see the collar, I just don't love it. And I'm wondering if I should put some elastic in the collar to kind of cinch it in a little bit more. I've never done that. I've talked about doing it before, but I've never actually ended up doing it to any of my jumpers. And I'm not really sure how to go about it. So if any of you have done that with a folded down collar, I'd be really grateful if you could let me know what kind of elastic I need to get, and if there's any tutorials or anything that you'd recommend watching. I do like how it looks now, especially, as I said, if I'm wearing something with like a low scoop neck and you can't see the collar. I love the look. I love the way it looks in the shoulders. I love the way it looks around the collar, but I want to be able to wear more things underneath it, and I think cinching in the collar will give me more options then of what I could wear under it. In terms of my plans for this pattern, as I said, I'm going to be releasing it as a free pattern and also a free video tutorial. I did ask on Instagram for your opinions on what makes a good video tutorial, whether you're a beginner or advanced. What do you look for in a video tutorial? For this video tutorial, I want it to be suitable for beginners, maybe not like complete beginners. Like if you've made a stockinette jumper before and you want to try cables, I would really like for this tutorial to be able to help you with that. My plan is to include a separate tutorial for the cables that are in this jumper, so that will be for people who haven't cabled before, or if you have, or you just need a refresher. And then the actual tutorial itself will be a separate video. It might be 2 separate videos depending on how long it will be. I'm not sure yet. My plan is to start recording that in June, so as soon as this one's finished, and I'm going to be working with a very exciting yarn for that second sample. It's part of a wider collaboration that this project has become, which I don't want to talk too much about now because I'm afraid to put it out into the universe in case it falls through. But I'm so excited for the collaboration. There's a few different elements to it. So one of them will be the yarn that I am going to be making my second sample with. Another element will be relevant to the test call. I will be putting out a test call for this in the middle of June, I think. That's my goal. Testers can receive a discount on this yarn that I'm still not going to mention exactly what it is, but I've used it before in the channel. It's an Irish yarn. If you've been around for a while, you might have a good idea of what it is. But yeah, testers will receive a discount code to work with that yarn. I will talk about all of this before the test call. I will put out a video in the middle of June to coincide with the test call, and I'll give proper details of the test call and the yarn on all that good stuff then. But I just want to give people a heads up now, because I know for myself, sometimes I want to apply for a test knit, but I have too many projects on my needles and I just know it's not a good idea. So if this is something that you really want to test knit, just make sure your knitting calendar allows for it in the middle of June, start of July. The test call will be middle of June. The test probably won't be starting until the start of July. So those are the important dates for you if you want to test knit this. So I'm very excited for this collaboration. It's been in discussion since November, I think, when I first started knitting this first jumper or first sample. So yeah, it's been in the works for quite a while, but as I said, I've just been afraid to say anything in case it doesn't happen, but I'm fairly certain at this point that it is going to happen. So keep your eyes peeled. I am so excited to share more about it. My next project is another self-drafted project, and this is the V-neck, broken rib V-neck raglan that I spoke about in my last episode. This is incredibly awkward to show because it's all in panels. I'll put photos up of the 2 panels that I've knit so far, which is the back and the front panel. I'm self-drafting this with the help of a book by Amy Herzog. It's called The Ultimate Sweater Book, and it has instructions to help you self-draft patterns in a bottom-up construction and there's a few different yoke constructions that are covered. So there's a raglan, there's circular yoke, there's drop shoulder and set-in sleeve, I believe. The yarn that I'm using is from Ochre Yarns, which is an Australian yarn brand, and it's their 306 base, which is merino yak silk in the colourway Blossom. It's a fingering weight yarn, but I'm holding it double and I'm working mine on 3.5mm needles. In the last episode, I had just finished the back panel and I talked about the gauge issues that I was having with this. My gauge just seems to change a few times, and so I ended up redoing the back panel maybe 3 times. Eventually I got the back panel done and I immediately cast on the front panel, which flew by because I was a lot more certain of my gauge, and so it just went by so fast. I had no issues, I didn't have to rip back anything. For the v-neck I did the same decrease rate as for the raglan shaping, which is every 3 rows. Once I had done just one of these triangles, I was worried that this angle was too steep. I was wondering if maybe I should have decreased every 2nd row instead, which would have given kind of a less steep angle like this. Because basically I want quite a thick collar. I want it to be about 1.5 inches, and I was worried that the center part would come up really high on my chest if it was that thick. And I was also thinking that I might have to adjust the decrease rate in the center part where your v-neck kind of converges, to make sure that the fabric here doesn't bunch up. But actually after working the 2nd triangle then, I think it looks okay. I'm actually pretty confident about how this is looking. I am making a project vlog about this, and I'm also making a project vlog about my Aran jumper as well. So I'll go into more detail about the numbers and how I figured it all out in that. I have started the sleeve. I started this yesterday, and this took a bit of thinking because I had to figure out my cuff circumference, my bicep circumference, the sleeve length, but not including the raglan depth, because if the raglan depth has already been decided and determined by my front and back panel, and so I need to figure out my entire sleeve length and then subtract the raglan depth to figure out how long it's going to be from the point where the sleeve joins the body down to the cuff. I decided to base the dimensions off a jumper that I already own. It's just a commercial jumper, but I was out yesterday when I cast this on and I didn't have the jumper that I needed to measure. I didn't have my measuring tape and I didn't have the book to tell me how to calculate all these things, so I just decided to wing it. I got my bar cord and I held it from here and I stretched it down to my wrist, and then I measured the barber cord with a ruler. I only had a 30cm ruler, so I had to fold the barber cord and measure it really inaccurately, and I calculated a sleeve length of 55cm, which makes no sense because the front and back panels are both 55cm and the sleeve is obviously going to be longer, but I just didn't cop that, and I just thought, okay, 55cm, let's go. And I based my decrease rate off of that. I started knitting. I knit about 50 rows, which didn't take too long, to be fair. It was about maybe an hour or 2 hours. And then when I got home, I measured everything properly and realised how far off I was. And so I had to restart, but it's fine. Actual sleeve length is supposed to be 65cm and the raglan depth is 22.5cm. So you subtract 22.5 from 65 and that gives you 42.5, which means that this portion of the sleeve needs to be 42.5cm. By this portion of the sleeve, I mean from the wrist up to the bicep, at which point it'll join the body and the raglan seams will start. So from the wrist up to the bicep, you're working increases, basically the opposite to a top-down jumper where you would work decreases in the sleeve. So that's what I'm working on now. All the stitch counts and row counts that I'm using for my size will be in my Ravelry project page. I won't be calculating those numbers for other sizes, but there is a very similar pattern on Ravelry called the Pearl Sweater. I think it's by GODOX Slicked, and it's a v-neck broken rib. Like, it's very similar to what I'm making. I am aware that I could be working the sleeve in the round, at least up until the raglan seams, but I would be worried about a change in tension between working in the round versus working flat. Usually with stockinette, I don't have any tension differences, but with broken rib, there might be some differences, so I'm not going to take the risk. I'm just going to knit it flat, and it's working out so far. My next whip is my daily pullover. This is a pattern by Pearl Soho that I've modified so much that I'm not really knitting the pattern anymore. I'm knitting this in a yarn from Great Ocean Road, which is an Australian yarn brand, and this is their Summer Fiesta yarn, which is a merino linen blend. It's a light fingering weight and this is the colour moss green. I'm knitting this on 2.75mm needles, so it is growing slowly, but growing nonetheless. In the last episode, I had almost finished the body, so I have bound off the body with a 2-bitter bind off, and then I went straight into the sleeves. In the last episode, I said that I didn't have the 4-inch 2.75mm Chow-Goo needles to work the sleeve on. And sometimes my tension on sleeves is tighter than on body, so I was going to see if I could work the sleeve on 3mm needle, and hopefully my tension would still be the same on the sleeve as on the body, but it was not at all. I worked about 20 rounds on the sleeve and there was like a massive bulge going from the body to the sleeve. My tension was so much looser on the 3mm needle, so there was no way I was going to make it work. To be honest, I even doubted that my tension would be better on the 2.75mm needle, but I went out and bought those tips and I'm about halfway through the sleeve now, and you can see that it actually looks good. There's no obvious bulging where the body turns into the sleeve. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I'm about halfway through the sleeve now. There is a bit of a bulge somewhere, but that's where I had a lifeline in and I took it out, so I think that will be fine after blocking. I am taking my time with this, but it's nice to have on the needles. I made so many changes to the pattern, as I mentioned. Number one, because I had gauge issues, and number two, because the numbers in the pattern just didn't add up to me. I still haven't figured out if that's a me problem or a pattern problem, but I decided to just figure out my own thing anyway. One minor thing I've noticed, and you'll see it in the B-roll footage, is that there seems to be quite a bit of fabric bunching around the raglan seams, and that could absolutely be due to the way that I modified it. I basically added a lot more rows in the yoke before splitting for the body and the sleeve, and I adjusted the increases around the last few raglan rows. I don't know if that's resulted in there being too much fabric around the raglan seams or if this is something that will block out. One thing that I am keeping in mind is that the yoke is blocked but the collar is not, and with the collar I didn't pick up every stitch. I picked up I think 2 in every 3 stitches, and it is pulling the yoke in a little bit. But I figured after blocking, the ribbing would kind of open out and that will release some of the fabric in the yoke and it might look better. If it doesn't, I can redo the collar, picking up every stitch going around, and see if that makes a difference. I think that should relieve the appearance of the excess fabric around the raglan seams. But if it doesn't, it's a very minor issue, not one that would stop me from wearing it. Another thing that I've noticed, and you might not see it when I'm holding it up, I think it's more obvious when it's on, is that the back neck kind of sits a bit funny. And I did notice this mentioned in a few Ravelry projects. The back neck has short row shaping, and people on Ravelry have speculated that it doesn't need short row shaping, and actually the short rows are what causes this bunching. So I don't think it's too obvious on mine. It's just something I looked out for because I had seen so many people mention it on Ravelry, but it doesn't bother me. It's on the back. It's going to be under my hair. You won't see it at all. But just something to keep in mind if you are thinking about making this. Maybe just omit the short rows. I'm not sure it really benefits from them. This is another project that I'm feeling quite positive about, which is probably a bit of a change from previous episodes. I think all 3 of the projects that I've shown so far have given me a fair amount of grief over the past few months, and I've definitely talked about it in previous episodes. So it's nice to feel like I've kind of rounded that corner and to feel a bit positive about all 3 of them. My next whip is a fun one. It's my sweet shop blanket. I'm knitting this with sport weight cotton yarn that I got from Hobby a long time ago. Back before I was knitting, just when I was kind of exclusively crocheting, I bought loads of sport weight yarn in lots of different colours, and I'm trying to get rid of it now. So sweet shop blanket for my cousin who's expecting a baby girl over the summer. This pattern is by Laura Penrose and I have knit it before. I didn't love it the last time I knit it. Like, I love how it turned out, but I personally found it quite a tedious knit. It's hard to motivate myself to pick it up, but once I do start working on it, I feel eager to keep knitting squares until I run out of time, basically. Each square takes me 40 minutes to knit, and I won't start a square unless I know I have 40 minutes to finish it. I hate leaving the square kind of half done with the needle hanging out, because when you finish them, you have no needle on your work, which is kind of satisfying. I'm not sure how many squares I'm going to do. I'm not sure how big it needs to be. I'm going to do at least 16, so 4x4, and then I will probably add another row on top, so it'll be 4x5. I don't know if it will need another column as well, the 5x5. I know there are charts online for different sizes of baby blankets. I kind of want this to be the size for either a car seat or maybe a pram or a buggy. I think it can be smaller for a car seat, but if it was for a pram or buggy, it might need to be a little bit bigger. But yeah, I'm going to do the 4x4 and then I'm just going to ask my mum what she thinks. Well, I had sat down to edit my footage and I realised that my microphones had given up on me halfway through recording and they didn't notice. I first assumed that I would just need to record the whole thing again, but I realised that that was a complete waste of time because I had at least half an hour of perfectly good usable footage and it just wouldn't have made sense to re-record all of that, so I'm just going to pick up where I left off. Also, when editing, I noticed that the sound was a bit weird in that part of the footage. Maybe you didn't notice or maybe you did, but I just thought it didn't sound great, so I've made some changes to the microphone. I hope it doesn't sound too drastically different, but I hope it does sound better. And so that's just to explain the abrupt change in scenery, the change in outfit. It's 24 degrees today, so a significant jump since the last time I recorded. I think all of Europe is experiencing a heat wave at the moment, and this weather is quite rare for Ireland, so although I am enjoying it, I'm aware of the fact that it's only this warm because the world is on fire. So I'm wearing my cami number 7. This is a much more weather appropriate top, and I will talk about this because I'm planning on making a second one, so I'll talk about it more in the plans section. But for now, let's just pick up right back where we left off. I was talking about my sweet shop blanket and I was about to talk about how I am weaving in the ends as I go this time, which is something that I'm doing differently compared to the first time I made it. The first time I made it, I actually didn't weave them in. Don't judge me, I tied knots. I know, I was very bold. There was hundreds of ends and I could not bring myself to weave them all in, so I tied them in knots. It wasn't a gift, I still have it, so I figured if any of them come undone, I could just fix it. But since this one is a gift, I want to make sure that the ends are woven in properly. So I've been weaving in those ends as I go. In terms of the pattern itself, I don't love this style of pattern. I find it quite conversational and I prefer my patterns to be a little bit more succinct, like bullet points and things like that, whereas this one I just feel is a bit more talkative. I think that it could be kind of condensed a bit more, but that's just my personal preference. If you have a similar preference of pattern writing style, then just keep that in mind. And that's all I have to say about my sweet shop blanket for today. My last whip is a very small one. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. It's just a vanilla sock. And if you think, Michaela, that yarn looks familiar, it's because my last pair of vanilla socks was made using this exact same yarn combination. Actually, the contrast colour was the same as well. This is from the Olivia and Oliver Fibres Advent Calendar from 2024, I think. This is a spring colourway and I just cast these on because I was going to the gym. I usually do running for my cardio. I don't particularly like running, but I just do it because it's good for me. But that particular week I had some bad shin splints, so I decided to go on the indoor bike at the gym instead. And it was a very low intensity session. I was going slow enough that I knew I was going to be going slow enough that I could knit something stockinette in the round. So I cast on this toe-up sock. These are going to be a gift because I have a pair of socks in this exact yarn. So yeah, I really just cast these on to have something stockinette in the round. I started with Judy's Magic Cast On. I cast on 16 stitches total, so 8 stitches on each side, and then I increased to 64, and I've now finished the foot. I'm going to do a short row heel, and I'm just going to see how tall I can make the leg because I only have, I think, about 50 grams of the main colour, so I think I'll get a pretty tall sock out of it. It won't be an ankle sock by any means, but we'll see. I do have quite a few acquisitions, and to be honest, I don't need any more yarn. I have quite a lot and I am quite aware of the fact that I've acquired a lot of yarn over the last few months. I have one more jumper quantity of yarn on the way for my second sample of my Aran Jumper, but after that I definitely want to cut down on my yarn buying. I've also been trying to de-stash some yarn on Vinted and within my knitting group and stuff, and that's been going okay, so I am kind of getting some yarn out as well, but my yarn in is definitely more. But we're working on it. As for these acquisitions, I've actually packed most of them away since I recorded them the other day. So I'm just going to use that footage, but I'll just talk over it. So firstly, if you watched my last episode, you know I was in San Diego, and before I went, I thought it would be a good opportunity to get my hands on some hand-dyed yarn that I've had my eye on for a while, and that yarn is from ZZ Textiles. I've followed her on Instagram for such a long time, probably since I started knitting, and I don't think there's any other yarn dyer that I've come across that has an eye for colour that more closely aligns with mine. Like, I love so many of her colourways and I always have wanted to get something from her just because, yeah, her colourways, I'm in love with them. They're stunning, absolutely stunning. I think she has such a good eye for colour, and they're colourways that I don't really see that often, even in other hand-dyed yarns or in commercial yarns. So I decided to take advantage of the fact that I was going to the States and try and get some of her yarn. The way her website works is that she has some colourways in stock, and she also does jumper quantities dyed to order. So I I got a bit of both. I ordered some from the jumper quantity died to order section, and I also got some that were already in stock. I did email our hotel in San Diego and asked them if I could have a package shipped there in advance of me arriving, and would they be able to hang on to it until I arrived, and they said it would be no problem. And I also reached out to Rachel of ZZ Textiles and explained to her that I was going to be placing an order. It was going to be going to a hotel. I also asked her for like a general timeline window, and at the time that I emailed her, the timeline worked out so that the yarn would arrive just before I got to San Diego. But for many different reasons, I got delayed in ordering. I didn't order for at least another week after that initial email exchange. It turned out that it wasn't going to arrive not only before I got to San Diego, but it wouldn't even arrive while I was there. So I went into kind of panic mode because the other alternative was getting it shipped to Ireland, and the cost of shipping and customs is astronomical. It's crazy. Like if you spend €120 on yarn, you're going to spend €120 on shipping and customs and VAT. It's just the way it works out, and I just can't justify that. There's nothing in the world that I would pay that amount of customs and shipping fees on. So yeah, I kind of went into panic mode thinking, what am I going to do? Turns out I have a relative in Ireland, but one of her friends was coming home from California a few weeks later, and she very kindly agreed to let me have the package shipped to her, and she brought it back to Ireland with her. So it was definitely a bit of a roller coaster to get my hands on it, but it was worth it, and I'll show some footage now. The first one that I picked was 3 skeins of her baby Surrey lace base in the colours Fall-Vert. This yarn is 75% Surrey alpaca and 25% silk. I've never worked with Surrey alpaca before, so I was really excited to try this. I definitely want to make a jumper with it. I'm going to hold it with a solid colour yarn, although I'm just not sure what colour yet. I don't know if I want to go more towards blues or more towards greens. This is one of the colorways that first caught my eye. I really fell in love with it, and it was one of the first colorways that kind of introduced me to her yarn. So I'm so excited to have my hands on it, and yeah, I don't know exactly what I'm going to make with it yet, but it will definitely be something special. I got another skein of the baby Surrey lace base in the colour Broom, which is a very pale grey, and I think it kind of leans purple on camera. I want to make a hat out of this because I don't have any neutral coloured hats, and I've made a few hats with mohair, but again, I've never worked with Surrey alpaca, so I thought this would be a nice opportunity to try it. So again, I'm just going to hold this with a strand of wool in a matching colour. I don't know what particular wool or brand or whatever yet, but it doesn't really matter because for me, the main component of this hat is going to be the Surrey alpaca. I also got 1 skein of her silk sock base in the colour Wood Panelled, and this base is 80% merino wool and 20% 20% silk, and this colorway is a really dark brown, but in certain lights I think it kind of leans a bit burgundy. I think it's beautiful. Again, that one's going to be a hat, another neutral hat. I figure you can't have too many neutral hats. I currently have none. Finally, I got 3 skeins of her natural fingering base in the colorway Apelles. This base is 100% non-superwash wool, and I actually made a mistake when I was ordering this because I did intend to get the superwash base. From the photos on her website and on Instagram, the colorway is a lot more saturated on a superwash base, which I think is quite typical for superwash yarns versus non-superwash. It's a lot more saturated, and you can see more clearly the different tones of this ochre yellow color throughout the base, and I think the different tones of that ochre yellow are a lot more obvious in the superwash base than in the non-superwash. When the package arrived, I didn't even realize it was a non-superwash base. I just thought that the color looked different than what it was supposed to, but I looked at the label, obviously realized it was non-superwash, then looked at what I ordered, realized I had ordered the non-superwash. I don't know how I did that. It was not my intention at all, and I was a little bit annoyed at myself, a little bit disappointed because I just didn't know if I wanted to keep it. If I did get the superwash one, my plan was to hold it with a lace weight fluff in a colorway that would, a solid colorway that would kind of blend all of the variation in a way that you would still see all of those ochre yellow and somewhat green tones, but they would be blended with each other a little bit more. And so having the non-superwash yarn just didn't really fit into that plan, so I was a little bit disappointed, and my first thought was that I would just de-stash it and try and sell it to someone, but the more I look at it now, the more I think I like it, and I actually think it fits into my colour palette. I'm not a big believer in colour palettes, to be honest. Like, I know there are colours that suit people's skin tone and eye colour and hair colour and all that, but for me personally, I just don't give much weight to it. Like, I just wear whatever I want to wear, and I don't really think about whether or not it complements my hair colour or my skin tone. But I did, out of curiosity, just do some Google searching, and I think I'm a soft summer, but if any of you colour analysis experts think differently, I'd love to hear. A soft summer colour palette doesn't include any kind of jewel tones or saturated tones, and I actually do wear a lot of saturated colours and bright colours. So I realise I've been wearing colours that aren't in my colour palette, but again, that's just not something that I give much weight to. However, this kind of muted ochre yellow colour is actually in my colour palette, so now I'm kind of thinking maybe this is a good opportunity for me to wear this colour that I didn't intend to buy, but it might suit me really well and it might kind of be a blessing in disguise. In any case, this yarn is going to sit in my stash for a while regardless, and when it eventually comes time to use it, I'll decide then to destash it or use it. It definitely has grown on me more since I've received it, but I don't feel any pressure to make a decision about what to do with it right now. My next acquisition I actually do have with me, and I got this on Vinted, which was my first time buying anything on Vinted. I've heard about people getting some really amazing yarn on Vinted, so I decided to create an account and see what I could find, and one of the first things I saw was this Hedgehog Fibers Cashmere Merino. It's a heavy lace weight yarn, and I'm not actually sure what the name of the colour is, but as you can see, it's a very dark purple, very similar to that Explore Knitted Fibers Avenoir colour, although I think this is a little bit warmer, whereas the Avenoir kind of leans more grey purple, or even a navy blue grey purple. So this person on Vinted had 5 cakes. They were all the skeins were already caked up. 5 cakes for €50, and they're full-size cakes. So this yarn comes in 50-gram skeins, and on the Hedgehog Fibers website it's €32.90 for a 50-gram skein, and I paid €10 for each 50-gram skein, so I thought that was an absolute steal. I have no idea what I'm going to do with this. I don't know if it's going to be a garment or a shawl. I feel like the yarn kind of lends itself better to a shawl. If I used it for a garment, I'd probably have to hold it with something because it's heavy lace weight. But at the same time, it's such a similar colour to my Aran jumper that I don't know if I want to make a garment in it. I'd have 2 jumpers in very similar colour. So at the moment I'm leaning towards shawl, but I'm not going to use this anytime soon, so I could change my mind by the time I get to use this. Finally, I have a yarn that was given to me by a lady in my knitting group. She didn't know exactly what it was, but we speculate that it's Studio Donegal Irish Heather. And I'm not even sure of the colourway, but as you can see, it's an emerald green with kind of yellow and blue. Oh, it looks so good on camera. It actually looks beautiful. You can see the yellow and blue flecks in there. So she had 950 grams of this and she was just giving it away. I didn't need 950 grams, so another lady in my knitting group agreed to split it with me. So it worked out really, really well. On the topic of Studio Donegal, just a quick note, the pronunciation of Donegal is Donegal. I can understand why people say Donegal. It looks like Donegal, but it's Donegal. Those are all my acquisitions for now, but as I said, I do have some yarn on the way for the second sample of my Aran jumper, but I'll obviously show that in the next episode. In terms of my plans, I have no business casting on anything right now. I have 5 whips, although a good few of them are very near completion. I think it'll be the kind of thing where I don't have any finished objects for a while and then I have 3 finished objects at once. But I am going away this weekend for almost a week. I'm going to Spain. It's going to be very hot. I don't want to take my Aran jumper. I don't want to take my pink V-neck jumper. And I obviously don't want to take my sweet shop blanket. Those would all be not pleasant projects to bring travelling. I was thinking about bringing my daily pullover, but I just can't work on that for very long periods of time in one go because I'm knitting quite tightly with the yarn and it just digs into my finger a bit and it's a bit uncomfortable. And the same goes for the socks. Although they are a really good portable travel project, the yarn will just cut into my finger a bit too much. So I'm going to bring the daily pullover, and I'm also going to cast on a second project for when the yarn starts to hurt my hands a bit. And so I've decided to cast on Camisole number 7 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. For this, I'm going to use Sandnes Garn Tin Lena in the colour 9062. I've had this yarn in my stash for 2 years, which is longer than any other summer yarn that I have in my stash in a quantity large enough to make a full top out of. I actually bought this yarn with the intention of making Camisole number 4, but after I made this Camisole number 7 that I'm wearing now, I realised I just really like the pattern. I think I prefer that the straps are a bit thicker on this than the Camisole number 4. For me, that just means I'll get more wear out of it, so it just seems like a better choice. I'll just quickly show you this one. I knit this in Hobby, I think it was called Soft Print Cotton, and it's fingering weight, and this is in the colour Rose. I think the yarn is discontinued now, but it was a really nice yarn to use in this top. The Camisole number 7 is, as you can see, a V-neck broken rib top, but for me what really stands out is the kind of decorative details on the front. I really like that, and so I decided to make it again since I know that I like it. So I have swatched It's a bit of a messy swatch. I swatched on 2.75mm CHOW needles. The pattern calls for 3mm needles, but I thought my gauge would be a bit loose. It's actually quite tight, so I think I will just go up to 3mm. I'm not going to swatch again. I did look at the sizes given in the pattern, and even if my gauge is slightly too big on a 3mm or slightly too tight, the final circumference will still be within a range that I'm happy with. And I did actually swatch flat and in the round, so the bottom part is all flat, and then I did like I think 10 rows of in the round. When I swatch in the round, I just carry my yarn across the back, so it looks incredibly messy, but it means that I can reuse the yarn. I do have a feeling that it's going to look different knit in the round versus flat. I don't think you can really see on the swatch now. I obviously didn't knit very much in the round. I just kind of knit 10 rows and then gave up. With the cami number 7, you knit each of the 4 triangles at the front and back flat, and then you join them all in the round, and then you knit the rest of the body down. I figure I'll put a lifeline in before I join in the round, and if my tension does change, I'll just rip it back and I'll knit the front and back separately flat and just seam them up at the sides when I'm finished. And that's my only plan that I have for the foreseeable future. So with that all being said, we have reached the end of the video. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you're not subscribed already, please do consider subscribing to the channel or give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And if you have any questions, of course, do leave them down below. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.